Hey guys! So today we're going to be going over your final project for this class. So just as a reminder, you're still going to have your final review homework and your final. So the final review homework will just be a good little summary to get your brain right in check to do the final. But in addition, we have this little project to do in between. So you'll see this posted in Canvas. So it's got three major components, and I'll run through a few of those, a few of the ideas behind them, and then I'll give you a little rundown on how to go about all of it. So step one, you're just going to create a survey. Through most of our given examples, they're all coming from surveyed data. So we're going to use Google Forms to create a survey of a measurable topic. So that just means that it's going to give you a numerical output or something that gives you a number. So I gave you a couple options to measure. So if you wanted to know how many siblings your classmates or whoever you're going to send your survey to has, how old they are, how many credits they're enrolled in. You can even make it on a scale of 1 to 10. So how are you liking online classes? How much do you like math? Everyone's going to say a 10. I already know that one. So I guess that survey is just out the window. But we're going to want to create a survey to test a certain hypothesis. And that's what brings us to part 2. So you definitely want to have a hypothesis in mind when we're going about this. So if I chose on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about online classes? Then we're going to have a certain idea about those classes or how we're expecting people to answer. So my expectation would be, for this example, I'm guessing probably 50% of people are liking online classes. You can make it just that simple. So once you have that hypothesis in mind, you want to just identify your null hypothesis and your alternative hypothesis. And if it makes you feel better, you can do it in both words and in symbolic form. Remember, symbolic form is just this section right here, just giving you your proportion being equal to and your proportion either being not equal to, less than, greater than, all depending on what you're measuring. So I gave you a separate little example down here, and I'll go over that one as well. So I gave you an example. If you were measuring how much statistics students love math, which I know you all would give it a 10 out of 10, but for the sake of argument, we're hypothesizing that 50% of them would rate it over a 5, at least. So my null hypothesis would be my threshold. So I would be measuring 50% of people who would rank statistics at a 5 out of 10. So we'd be looking at our survey results and taking those who gave us an output greater than 5. And our alternative hypothesis would be more than 50% of people would rank it a 5 out of 10, at least. So it's similar to what we're given in a problem, but we're starting from scratch and creating the surveys ourselves. So the last part is the part that I know you'll all love. So part 3 is showing your results in conclusion. So once you have your data, I want you to create either a pie chart or a bar graph. Sometimes when you're doing some of these things, some of your graphs will fight you. So typically I would want a bar graph, but if your results are only giving you a pie chart, I'll take it. So I want a graph of some type. And then using either StatCrunch, Excel, other technology, I want you to give me your N, which is just the number of people you are surveying, your mean, standard deviation, and then the things that we've been focusing on for like chapter 8, chapter 9, a little bit of chapter 7. We want to be looking at our test statistic, and we're looking at a proportion. So our test statistic will be a z, and our p-value. And then when you're using or creating your conclusion, you just want to be using a significance level of 0.05 to compare to your p-value. And then I just gave you a little output example of what you might get. So, and then at the bottom, I just gave you a little rundown of what I'm looking for. So I just want a copy of your survey results. So either in Excel, or if you're having trouble exporting it, always just let me know, shoot me an email. The values listed in part 3 are up here. So your N, your mean, your standard deviation, test statistic, and your p-value. And then the graph that I asked you to make at the beginning. And then the very last portion is just a summary about your hypotheses and just a few sentences, so 5 to 10, just a little paragraph, telling me what your hypotheses are, so both your null and alternative, what you got as your results, and what can be concluded from those. So again, comparing your p-value to the alpha I gave you, or your significance level, and then what can be concluded from there. So that's what I'm looking for in terms of the entire project. That's all of it. It fits all in this 2 pages. So you can give me separate documents, all one document. I don't really mind either way, as long as you get me all the information. So you'll be able to submit more than one document in the submission form in Canvas. So no worries on that front. So moving on, we just want to start in Google, and you want to sign into your BayPath account. It's probably going to be your easiest way to do all of the things coming up. All right, so first things first, we're going to want to make our form to be able to send out a survey to our friends, family, whoever you want or can get to take your survey. Also, a little side note, if you're having a hard time getting 10 people to do a survey, you could, definitely not a recommendation from me, but I would never know if you, say, took the survey yourself. That would be against the rules, but if you're having a hard time, it's a way around it. So just as a side note, if you're having a hard time, but once you're logged into your BayPath account, you'll see hopefully a nice little picture of yourself and our typical apps look up here. So if we click here, hopefully, all right, and we scroll down, usually it's in the second section. There's this purple paper here that's labeled forms. So we just want to click that, and it will hopefully quickly bring us to our forms page. So the really neat thing about forms is that it actually comes with some setup options. So your easiest starting template would probably be the blank quiz, because we are going to be taking some information from other people. So we're only really looking at making one question. So the blank quiz will probably be our best bet. So if we click the blank quiz, you can also create a blank document and work more on it, but this is the most straightforward way of doing it. So just a little bit about forms. It's usually easier to manipulate when you're in your BayPath account, which is why I recommend doing it that way. But it works in your, if you have a personal Gmail account as well. So we can go up here and edit our title. So this is our MAT450 survey. So I guess we'll give it that little title. So we can also put a title here. So you can let the survey taker know what's happening. So, I mean, if we wanted to be straightforward, Professor Tony is making, spelling today, guys, I'm sorry. making me do this. So you always have the option to name it whatever you want. Give a little extra detail if you're going to use this in the future. And then down here, if we click on this untitled question, we can fill in our question that we want answered. So I guess I'll make mine about math students. So on a scale of 1 to 10, and you'll see here, my question is actually adjusting as I was typing it. How much do you enjoy math? Oh my goodness gracious. Typing is difficult today. So we can change our scale. So you can actually have it start at 0 if you're feeling crazy. But if we want our scale of 1 to 10, we can hit this little drop down here. And we can label each of our axes. So we would put 1 as, I don't know, you gross, I suppose. And 10 could be, I don't know, super. You can name them whatever you want. It's just to give your survey taker more insight into which way your scale is going. But let's say that you didn't want to do a scale. You wanted to know how old someone was, or I don't know, some other numerical one. You can actually have them make a short answer. If you wanted to give somebody a multiple choice option. So if we were surveying to see, I had a student once do how many leggings do you own, and had multiple choices from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, and then more than 5. So the possibilities are really endless. So even if you did multiple choice, all you would have to do is type in an option, click your next one, and it'll keep creating options for you. So I'm just hitting Control Z, so it'll bring me back because I wanted to do a scale. But just know that there are plenty of options here for what you are thinking. So even if you wanted to have everyone answer short answers, you could have them actually answer on a scale of 1 to 10. They could type their own number. So really, it's up to you. Possibilities are, well, I guess I shouldn't say endless, but it's all up to how you want to deal with your results after. So once our survey is set up, we can go up here to change the appearance. If we don't like the way it looks, we don't like purple, I don't know, let's change it to yellow or orange, whatever you're feeling. And then you can always change the background, font, all that good stuff. And then there is an eyeball right here, which actually gives you a previewed view of your survey. So we'll click that really quick. So you'll see here you have the options to click on any of the boxes. And then once you're done, you can hit submit. And then this is exactly what your survey taker would see. So we'll X out of that. And then now you should notice something different. We now have a response here. So not only did this create a preview, but if you wanted to open the survey for somebody to take, you could do it that easily. So you'll now see in the responses, this is just a little glimpse into all of the very exciting things you will soon see. So you'll actually get a live graph as people are responding, which is one of the really cool parts of this. So we'll see this one answer that I put in myself, and we'll have a little summary of our results. So we have more settings. So if you wanted to collect email addresses from the people responding, if you wanted to send it to people outside of BayPath, you definitely want to uncheck this box because this will only let people inside BayPath answer it. If you want to limit it to 1 response per person, there's a lot of really cool things that you can do, and I definitely encourage you guys to poke around and see what you can do, especially if you wanted to make something a quiz. So we don't have point values for how well you guys like math, though I wish I could assign some, just kidding. But we don't have any point values associated with all of them. So I like to just uncheck that. It won't really change anything either way, but we can just hit save down here and we'll be all set. It'll just repopulate because we didn't have any right or wrong answers. So once your survey is all set up to send, all we have to do is hit the word send up here. And again, it gives you the option to collect email addresses. If you want to see who answered it, that's a cool thing to do, but you can click in here and enter people's email addresses. Or if you click this little link up here, it'll actually give you a link that you can send to your friends, post on Facebook, which would be really cool. So really gives you a lot of options to send this off. So remember, you need at least 10 people to take your survey. So you need to get at least 10 responses. So I'm going to go back into my surveys, which if you ever need to go back, you can click this little purple paper. And I have a lot of surveys. So we're going to scroll down. I believe this is the one that I have filled in with responses. So if we go up to responses, my computer is going very slow. All right, there we go. So you'll always see a number up here that'll tell you the number of people who are either just submitting responses or have already submitted responses. So if we click here, we now see that I have 10 responses. It'll tell me here and up here, and it'll give me a graph that I can use later if I would like, because remember in the project you need a graph. So you can actually copy the graph. You'll see this pops up with a little copy chart option. So if you just click that, you can actually copy and paste it, and it copies the chart to your clipboard. So that's something that would be really useful for this project, wink, wink. So if we wanted to export our data to do more with it, we can click this box to export it into Sheets, which is the Google equivalent of Excel. Or we can always hit this little drop down and it'll give you even more options if you wanted to save it as a CSV file. But if we just click this, and hopefully it loads, there we go. Oh, maybe not. So we can create a new spreadsheet just labeled like this is. And then it'll fill in the timestamp data for when all of these surveys were taken. And then it will also put in your email addresses if that's something you collected. And then also it will give you the results that were done for each of our given numbers. So now that we have our data, we can use it to answer the rest of the questions in the assignment. So I'm just going to smush this over a little bit and then move this over. So in the project, oh my goodness gracious, we're looking for N, which is the number of people. So something I like to do, especially in Excel, is to kind of label what I'm looking for before I start putting it in, and this will especially be helpful for when you have to submit it. So we'll just type our N, and then we can press enter to go to the next box underneath. We can type mean, we can type standard deviation, test statistic, and our p-value. And if you guys actually wanted to write your summary in here, you could also write your summary. the boxes continue to move. You can write outside of them. You'll see this one is longer than the cutoff. It's whatever you guys are comfortable with. So our N is the number of people who took our survey. So we can set up an equation for this always, or we can just enter it. So I'll give you an equation just so you guys have it if you ever need it. So if you start typing count, there's actually an option that will count the number of boxes you have. So if you just double click, it'll auto-populate the formula. And you just want to select this first one and drag down while holding down your mouse and let go when you're done. So you always want to just double check that you have highlighted all of your data. And if you have, you can press enter and it will tell you your number of people. So this is also good if you ever have changing data. It's always good to use formulas if you can. So the next one, we're looking at our mean. So we can actually do another equation for this. We can say equals, and we're looking for our average formula. So again, we can double click here on average, and it'll formulate the rest of our formula. We just want to drag down for just our data. We want to make sure we do not put in our N. We just want the data we're manipulating. Press enter, and it'll give us our mean. So we know the mean on a scale of 1 to 10 on how much people like math is a 6.4. So next, we're going to want our standard deviation. So this one's not as straightforward. I'm going to be looking at STDEV for our standard deviation. And you'll notice it actually gave us a suggestion, but when we click it, it doesn't actually give us the data points we want. So you always want to be wary when it does give you an auto-populate. You want to make sure that it's giving you what you're looking for. So if that ever happens, have no fear. We can always erase what's in there and do the same thing we did before. Select up here and just drag down. And you'll see that it will also populate in here like it's supposed to, and like it did with all of our others. So now we have our N, our mean, and our standard deviation. Not bad. So the last two are our test statistic and our p-value. So just for old time's sake, I say that we should use our StatCrunch calculator. You can always use just doing it out by hand, not a big deal. We can use the p-value calculators. You can use an actual calculator. Whatever you guys actually feel the most comfortable with, have at it. But if we were to do it in StatCrunch, we could actually go to stat. We're doing a proportion stat because we're looking at the proportion of people who like math. We only have one sample and we have a summary. So I think this is kind of getting cut off the screen. But you guys are used to that. So our number of successes is going to be the number of people who answered over 5. Because remember, way back when we were talking about the project, I gave you guys the example. I hypothesized that more than 50% of them would rate this class over a 5. So we're going to actually want to count the number of people who answered over a 5. So I had a 10 over 5. I said rate. Oh, I did say rate over a 5. All right, so we can't count 5. So we have 10. 5 won't count. 8. So I'll just highlight these. 1, 3, 10, 10 are both over 5. Our 7 is over 5, and our 8 is over 5. So if we count how many highlighted boxes I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my number of successes or the thing I'm measuring, remember that that's always our first box, is going to be 6 because I had 6 numbers that were over 5. I had one that was 5, not going to count it, even though I should have phrased my hypothesis better. That was my bad. But if I'm looking strictly over 5, then I'm going to set it up that way. And my number of observations is just the total number of people who took my survey. It's our N. So it's going to be 10. And then my hypothesis was my P being equal to 0.5 or my P being greater than 0.5. And then we can go back to compute and press away. So now we have our test statistic and our p-value. So we can just type those in, 0.632 and a p-value of 0.2635. So I'm not too picky on how many decimal places you use. I typically use 3 for my test statistic if I'm just writing it out, and my p-value I use 4. That's just my rule of thumb. But one last thing I wanted to point out is that when you're doing your summaries and conclusions, you want to make sure you use your significance level of 0.05 to compare to your p-value, because we want to see if this 0.05 is less than or greater than your p-value. For me, my p-value is greater than my 0.05. And when your p-value is greater, you failed to reject your null hypothesis, which would prove our alternative hypothesis true. And that makes sense because my average score was over 5, and I had 6 values that came up over 5 out of 10. So that would prove that I had more than 50% because it was really 60%, at least for my data. So that's kind of why I call this math in the real world. I really make you guys look at a real world example that you create, and hopefully you guys have a little bit of fun with it. If you guys have any questions, shoot me an email, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon.